Spun off from Oppo in the May of 2018, Realme has been in existence for just a little over a year. Now, in this 15 months or so, can you believe they've launched 14 different phones? 15 if you count that upcoming Realme XT 730G or whatever it is that Snapdragon 730G phone ends up being called. You know, the one Madhav teased on stage during the Realme XT Indian launch. So it's almost one phone a month. Now, for a brand in its infancy, that's quite a lot of phones. So it's the brand that just made the XT making an excess of devices. Okay, bad pun. Sorry, I'll see myself out. Hey guys, Ash here from C4E Tech, and in today's video, let's take a close look at Realme's portfolio of devices and try to make some sense out of their lineup. Why, what exists, and if it's one phone too many. Okay, before we start, if you don't end up liking what you see in this video, if you feel this is something different, a little bit of fresh content, go ahead, give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon. Let's get started. At the Realme XT launch event, Realme CEO Madhav Seth had his own take on this, but honestly, listening to his explanation, it raised far more questions than it answered. Like, for example, why do we need 3 phones in the sub 10K segment? So here's my take on the situation. Is Realme launching a lot of phones in a really short amount of time? Yes. Is that a bad thing? Well, it's yes and no. Confusing? Okay, let me explain. Well, when Realme started off, they had a lot to prove. Sure, they had an edgy brand name, Realme, the A and the L in Realme. It seems like what you'd get if you rip the D apart, and Me is kind of like a different spelling for MI. So, shots fired at Redmi right with the name, but a name does not amount to much if you don't have the hardware to back it up. And hardware they did have with the Realme 1. It was a massive success. The MediaTek Helio P60 was a solid mid-range chip. It had a Full HD Plus display. It was one of the best performers in the under 10K segment. That said, it did also have some glaring omissions. It lacked a fingerprint scanner and it came with only a single rear camera at a time where a lot of phones in that segment were starting to come with dual cameras. Now this meant Realme had to address these issues with a follow-up. In came the Realme 2. It did address these issues, but it also raised a few different ones. We did get dual rear cameras, a fingerprint scanner, and a new notch display, but the internals, sadly, they took a hit. They were a downgrade, and also the display resolution took a hit. Of course, this did not sit well. It did not go unnoticed, and there was quite a bit of backlash. But Realme was just following in the footsteps of brands like Redmi and Asus, splitting their lineup into 2, because then came the Realme 2 Pro. It had a much better chip inside in the form of the Snapdragon 660. It had better dual cameras, a display with a water drop notch, and a Full HD Plus resolution. This was the need of the hour. It was a great launch, and as expected, the 2 Pro was well received. That said, Realme did notice that there was a vacuum left in the sub 10K segment and rushed to fill this with their budget-focused C series. The C1 borrowed quite heavily from the Realme 2, the internals, cameras, etc. But this time around, they managed to keep the price lower than the Realme 2, given that enough time had elapsed. Next came the U series. This is a selfie-focused lineup right from inception, it was aimed to compete with Redmi's Y series. Now, by now, guys, you should be seeing a trend here. Most of Realme's launches they've kind of been aimed at Redmi's phones. They're kind of counters to Redmi's series of phones, and it's not a bad thing. Redmi has been the unrivaled champion in this segment for a while now, and if you want to be the best, then you need to be able to take down the best, and that's kind of what Realme has been trying to do. So coming to the U1 here, it had a 25 megapixel selfie camera, and it was a decent attempt at cornering another Redmi dominated niche. And with this, Realme had established themselves firmly in the Indian budget smartphone scene, and Redmi started to feel the heat. Realme followed it up with the 3 and the 3 Pro, solid offerings in the sub 10 and 15K segments respectively, but this time Redmi was a step ahead, and after the underwhelming Redmi Note 6 Pro, they threw pretty much anything and everything in with this beautiful glass body toting Redmi Note 7 and Note 7 Pro. The Note 7 Pro in particular, it brought with it the 48 megapixel Sony IMX586 and the Snapdragon 675, a pretty lethal combo that dominated the 15K segment, and Realme found themselves having to play catch up once again. The Realme 3 Pro was good and it was able to compete even edge ahead GPU wise, but it fell behind mostly with the camera. So now Realme's answer? The Realme X. They were a little late to the 48 megapixel party. Maybe they couldn't source enough 586 sensors for the 3 Pro, but with the X they came back with a bang. Here we had a pop-up selfie camera, an AMOLED panel, an in-display fingerprint scanner, and of course that's Sony sensor. It was more expensive than the Redmi Note 7 Pro or even the 3 Pro for that matter, but Realme, they had still priced it quite competitively at around 17,000 rupees. So this was aimed at people who wanted premium features like pop-up cameras and all-screen AMOLED displays, but they didn't want to go all the way up to say a Redmi K20. Now then, if you didn't want to pay this extra money but wanted to really stay in that Redmi Note territory, then Realme again had to come back with other offerings in the form of the Realme 5 Pro and again the Realme 5. So Realme 5, it had the Snapdragon 665 chip, a newer refresh of the 660 found in the Redmi Note 7. This coincidentally also was the same chip that's on Xiaomi's Mi A3 that happened to launch a day later. Realme was ever so proud to brag that they had the first Snapdragon 665 phone in India. That's a little childish, but it also shows how passionate the brand is about their products. Now, the Realme 5 Pro had the Snapdragon 712, a 7 series chip compared to the 6 series 675 in the Redmi Note 7 Pro. And when it came to optics, Realme had all bases covered, ultra-wide sensor, depth sensor, and an all-new macro option. But technology seems to evolve ever so fast, and we seem to have stepped into another age of megapixel wars. Samsung now offers a 64 megapixel sensor, and with Redmi's Note 8 Pro coming with that 64 megapixel sensor, in another preemptive strike of sorts, Realme announced the Realme XT in India one day before Redmi's global announcement. This was kinda haphazardly done. Realme had a launch scheduled for later in the month. It almost felt like they just wanted to rush out a quick announcement, just to get the tag of the first 64 megapixel phone and all that. And they kinda did. They did steal Redmi's thunder. Like I said, childish but passionate. That said, remember the Note 8 Pro also comes with a big performance boost. It's powered by MediaTek's Helio P90T. The XT is still Snapdragon 712, just like the Realme 5 Pro. And if benchmark scores are anything to go by, the Note 8 Pro should hand Redmi the lead again, which is probably why we saw Realme kinda tease their Realme XT Pros so early. That one's supposed to launch in December, but Realme wants us to know they already have a Note 8 Pro competitor in the works. It's supposed to come with a 90Hz AMOLED panel and a Snapdragon 730G, other than the 64 megapixel cameras that we talked about already. So what does all this mean? Well, for one, Megapixel Wars 2.0, it's just begun. We have a 108 megapixel camera coming up now. That we'd probably see that from both Realme and Redmi in the future. And while Realme's intention might not be to spam a multitude of phones onto consumers, sadly that's what seems to be happening given how market trends evolve. But at least they have upgraded them to Pie and have a detailed roadmap out for Android 10 as well. All that said, for us consumers, there's always going to be frustration when we buy a brand new phone only for another one to be announced a few days or weeks later. But c'est la vie, it is what it is how things work. And for the lines get confusing, well, that's what I'm here for. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button and I'll do my best to clear your doubts and do as many comparisons as possible to help you choose what's right for you, not just with Realme, but also with Redmi or Samsung or any other brand, because most brands' lineups these days, they're pretty confusing, right? So that's basically all you need to know about Realme and the reasoning behind their multitude of launches. So what do you feel about this? Do you feel it's way too many phones that they're launching, or do you feel you're okay with these launches as long as the phones that they've launched are properly supported? Let me know in the comments below, and with that, we get to the end of this video. If you found this video a little different, a little refreshing, go ahead, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, vote it down, you know what to do. Subscribe, turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon if you haven't yet. Thanks a lot for watching. Till next time, my name's Ash. You've been watching C4 Retech, and I'm signing off for now. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.